Alrighty, welcome in everyone to just another edition of Just Another College Football Podcast. I am your host, as always, Tommy Brzee. It is Thursday, October 2nd around here, and we got some big games to pick. We are getting into a week 6 that might not jump off the page to a lot of people, but has landmines all over the place. I think there's going to be a number of upsets this upcoming week, and we'll talk about a lot of those games to start off. We'll get into the two big games of the weekend. Vanderbilt Alabama, one of the bigger games of the weekend, number 16 going to number 10 in the country, both coming off big-time wins, or Alabama coming off big-time win, Vanderbilt still undefeated on the season, and then we got Miami, Florida State, a huge one in there in Tallahassee, and Florida State badly needs the win going against a very, very good Miami team right now. Then we got some conference picks: Iowa State, Cincinnati, Texas, Florida, very much an upset spot there. Texas Tech, Houston, and a number of other things in that one. Then we'll do a little bit of a whip around. A number of teams that need a bounce back, including Georgia and Penn State. We'll get into Wisconsin, Michigan. We'll talk Boise State, Notre Dame, all that good stuff. And then we got some best bets for you. Went 3-5 last week, so hopefully we can turn things around, get back on the winning side of things this week. But let's go ahead and jump into this thing, because we got a number of things to talk about, and we'll start with the two big games of the weekend. We got big game predictions for you, and we'll start over there in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Vanderbilt goes on the road to Alabama. Alabama favored by 10.5 in this game. Over under at 56 or 55.5. I believe it actually just moved down to 55.5, and it is going to be a 3:30 kick. This one's going to be really, really fun. This is two very interesting teams. Obviously, we had what happened last year. Diego Pavia has already said if Vanderbilt plays their football, they are going to win this game. There's no doubt about that. He feels very confident about this football team going into it. Obviously, he very well should. They're 5-0 right now. Wins over Virginia Tech, win over South Carolina, and it feels like people are trying to explain away Vanderbilt just a little bit right now. Not to say that they're an absolute national title favorite or they're absolutely going to the CFP or anything like that. This is a good football team, and they play really, really good offensively, and it's not exactly the same approach as it was a year ago, so we'll talk about it here in a second, but Kane Womack's got to make sure he's prepared for this Vanderbilt, not last year's, because they still pace it down, they still grind teams down, they still sit on the ball, but they don't run the ball quite as much as they did a year ago. They take shots more than they did a year ago. They are a much more, let's say, all-around offense this year than they were a year ago, and it's a huge difference in the approach that Vanderbilt brings. So it's going to be really interesting to watch what happens in this one. Ty Simpson also said he doesn't want it to happen again. Period. End of story. They don't want to be as sloppy as they were. If you rewatch that game, Alabama probably should have won that game in a number of different ways. They played a number of very, very sloppy, had a number of turnovers, gave up plays that they just don't normally give up, had the obvious, the crazy Malachi Moore situation. A lot of different things went wrong in that football game for Alabama. They come into, Vanderbilt now comes into Tuscaloosa for this one, and it would be a huge one, plain and simple. It would be a very interesting thing if Kalen DeBoer was 0-2 against Clark Lee and 2-0 against Kirby Smart, but that's the world that we live in college football, and Vanderbilt has all the ability in the world to go do this, mainly because Alabama's really struggled to run the football and stop the run. If Vanderbilt can control this game from a time of possession standpoint, they're in pretty good shape. They know exactly what they're doing. They know what script they want to play out. If you give them the ability to kind of dictate what this game's going to be, Vanderbilt's probably going to win this one, if I'm being totally honest. It's going to be really, really fun to watch this one unfold. Obviously, Alabama coming off the huge win over Georgia. You head into this one, you're thinking, if either of these teams, at least from where I'm sitting, if either of these teams want to make the CFP, I think they kind of need this one. Alabama already has the loss to Florida State, and if they lose this weekend, that's a loss to a two-loss team. You have a Missouri, Tennessee, LSU, Oklahoma still on deck, as well as a game against Auburn at the end. Wouldn't be ideal at all. And I think you'd be walking a tightrope, and considering how many teams in the SEC I think could end up 9-3, I think you might get lost in the shuffle at the end of the day if you are 9-3 as Alabama. For Vanderbilt, I think we understand that the CFP is probably not letting a 10-2 Vanderbilt in, especially if they miss the SEC championship, but still a tall order to even get to 10-2. They're undefeated right now, but if they lose this one, they still got LSU, Missouri, at Texas all in a row, and then Tennessee at the end of it. So it is going to be tough for one of these teams to make it if they don't find a way to win this game. I think the winner's in pretty good shape. Not to say the winner's going to make it, but I think it's fair to say the loser is in really bad shape going into the CFP, at least the race, the rest of the way. the players to watch, in my opinion, Junior Sherrill has been incredible for this football team. Already has 5 touchdowns on the year, the leading in that category, 225 yards through the air. Very talented guy, and a guy that can totally change this football game. If he gets one-on-one with a guy like Damani Jackson, I like Junior Sherrill to win that matchup, and I think it could be a huge moment for Vanderbilt where they're grinding you down, and then they make one big-time play. Obviously, they're going to be capable of making a number of them, but Junior Sherrill is going to make a number of them, and I think he could be the difference maker in this game. And then LT Overton, whenever you play a team like Vanderbilt that has so many option reads with Diego Pavia going off the edge or the running back going off the edge and Diego Pavia being able to pull it and go down the center inside the tackles, guys like LT Overton on the outside are going to be uniquely important. If they can find a way to keep their feet, make sure that they can still get the running back while accounting for Diego Pavia in the run game, as well as getting after him in the pass game, because they will drop back and pass more often in this game than they did a year ago. LT Overton's going to be massive in this game, and there's a number of guys, especially on the defensive side of the ball and really at the defensive line, that are not going to be playing for Alabama in this game. They're going to have to be ready to roll. Quay Rousseau, they just lost, I believe, for the year, if I'm not mistaken, and there's going to be someone else on that other side. They're going to have to be ready to roll. There's no doubt about that, because there's going to be a lot asked of them in this football game. The matchup to watch to me is Tim Beck against Kane Womack, because these are two guys that went at it last year, and Tim Beck got the better of Kane Womack by a good margin in that game. So now you look forward, and Kane Womack, he's been incredible since that Florida State game, has been mixing things up a lot more, has been playing around with a lot more coverages, and it really did hurt Georgia a week ago. Can he do that this week? Or is he preparing for a team that he saw last year, and Tim Beck's running not entirely different offense, but something different enough to at least catch Alabama off guard and make this a much tougher game than maybe Alabama fans are thinking right now. Obviously, they're going to be on their P's and Q's. Kane Womack will have his guys ready, but there's a lot of things the Tim Beck offense does that you can be as prepared in the world for, and you still might not be able to stop it, just because if you make the right read, if Diego Pavia makes the right read, that is, they're going to be off for 15 yards, and he tends to make the right read. But some keys to this game, Vandy's approach will be really interesting to me, because the big thing here is they are a little bit different this year. They love to take shots downfield. They're a little bit more aggressive on offense. They're a little bit less of this ground and pound. They still hold on to the ball. They still run the clock on offense, and they still, grind the clock down, but they're much less of a, outright run team this year than they were a year ago. What do they look like in this matchup? Because I do think it kind of benefits them to gear it down, to run the ball pretty consistently and try to lean on that, partly because that's Alabama's defense's weakness, and the other side because I don't know if you're going to get the same exact performance out of Ty Simpson, but you also want to keep the ball out of his hands. You don't want to push the ball into a guy's hands that played probably better football than just about anyone in the country a week ago against Georgia. Then you have Alabama on early downs. Alabama was incredible on third down a week ago. I believe finished 12 of 18 against Georgia. They put themselves in a lot of third and 10s, a lot of third and 9s, and then Ty Simpson just had to make a play, and he consistently made the play. He's an incredible football player that I think is going to consistently make those plays throughout the year, but the reality of the matter is you can't keep putting yourselves in those positions. Ty Simpson can only make so many plays on third and 10, so Jamaria Miller is going to have to be huge. Savion Riley is going to have to be huge, and they're going to have to make plays in this run game. Not Savion Riley, excuse me. That's a different player from a different team, but at the end of the day, these guys are going to have to be huge in this run game, because if they're not, then it's going to be one of those moments where you're putting it all on Ty Simpson's shoulders. Then one or two mistakes makes a huge difference in this football game. And then the revenge factor. This is a very real thing. A lot of these guys' first bad moment as a college football player was at the hands of Vanderbilt. You have all those freshmen like Ryan Williams and Xavier Brown and all those guys on the back end of that defense that was really their first moment where they felt like we're not as good of a football team as I thought we were, and they were coming off a massive win against Georgia just like they are right now. I think these guys are going to be ready to roll. I think it's going to be very, very intense in there, and I think it's going to be close for about a half of this game. I think they're going to be battling, going back and forth. We're going to be tuning in. It's going to get really interesting. And then Ty Simpson makes a couple plays deep in this game. I think Alabama wins at 38-23. I think Vanderbilt puts up a good fight in this game. I don't know if they have enough defensively to slow down Alabama, and I just think Alabama has the athletes to slow down Vanderbilt enough. I think Vanderbilt offense will get going a little bit. I don't think it'll ever fully get off the ground, and Alabama gets a relatively comfortable win, but it'll probably be a little bit closer than that 15 point says. I think Alabama wins this one, though, at home, and gets a little bit of revenge on Vanderbilt, as weird as that sounds. Then this one, the huge one down there in Tallahassee, Florida. Miami goes on the road to number 18 Florida State. We have Miami favored by about 4.5 in this game, over under at 53.5. This one's going to be awesome. And I think there's a lot of people that are, I don't want to say dismissing Florida State, but they definitely are kind of rethinking this game. Is a Miami blowout? Can they just roll over this team? And Florida State goes back to what they were a year ago in the Alabama game, which is a total anomaly that will be looked back on as the craziest result of the season. I don't really see it that way. I think the Virginia game, I talked about it when I broke it down on Tuesday. I think that was kind of a perfect storm. I think there was a number of things working against Florida State in that football game, and I think they just kind of got away from them. I don't think that was a game that was super indicative of who Florida State is. Now, they have a number of things to figure out, plain and simple. There's no doubt about that. They have to be more consistent offensively. They can't get mistakes from Tommy Castellanos in this football game, because if you do, Miami's going to take full advantage. And they have to get more from that defense, particularly the defensive line, because you look at the Miami offensive line. Absolute nightmare. There's no doubt about that. Now, they did get 3 INTs last week, so they were able to take the ball away from Virginia, but they also gave up 211 on the ground. And if you allow that to Miami, you're not winning that football game. Plain and simple. Whenever Carson Beck gets over 200 yards rushing, you can feel pretty confident that he's going to make a number of plays with that time. So you got to figure out how you're going to get to Carson Beck. I think Tony White might be the most important person in this entire game. The Florida State defensive coordinator, he's got to get creative, because this is a very, very good group up front for Miami at the offensive line. And you have a guy in Carson Beck that you don't pressure him, he's going to tear you to pieces. That's just who he is. One way or another, you're going to have to find a way to get after this kid. Florida did a relatively good job. I believe got 13 pressures in that football game. So they did a pretty good job of getting after him and keeping him off the spot, making him a little bit nervous. And he made mistakes. And that football game played by far his worst game of the season. Florida State has to find a way to do that, and that really comes down to Tony White heating him up with cornerback blitzes, safeties coming off the edge, a linebacker coming down the A-gap, maybe multiple. Just play around with different things and see if you can get a couple of mistakes from a guy that, as of right now, just doesn't look very prone to making those mistakes. The big thing in this game that I think has been slightly overlooked as people have been talking about it is this is the first time Miami's playing away from home. And they're going into Tallahassee at night. It is going to be an incredible, incredible crowd. That fan base wants to win this one very badly, because they know they fall to 2 losses right after beating an Alabama team in week 1. They're going to be in a position that they feel like, is Billy Napier the guy again? It's going to become a huge conversation once again. Now, should it be is a totally different conversation that we can have in the hypothetical that they lose, but at the end of the day, this is going to be a huge moment for FSU if they want any chance to stay in the ACC race, to stay in the college football playoff race. They are going to have to find a way to win this football game. It's going to be incredible to watch this one unfold. But Florida State falls to 0-2 in the ACC. There's too many favorable schedules around the ACC with Duke and Georgia Tech and a couple other teams. Cal is another one that you're probably not going to find your way back into it if you're 0-2 going into this. And if they're 0-2 now, I have to assume they're going to drop one later as Florida State. For Miami, they could very well be fine. There's no doubt about that. But you're, again, in a position where tiebreakers are going to mean something when it comes down to the ACC title race. And you don't play a lot of those teams like a Georgia Tech, where maybe they just get in because they didn't play you and they don't have a loss in conference, or they have one, but the tiebreakers work out in their advantage. Miami's got to find a way to win this game. It's going to be really interesting to watch what happens in this one, because I think you're going to have about 5 or 6 teams in the race down like 2 weeks left in the season for the ACC title. The question is, the 2 teams in it, or is it just one of them that's kind of pulling away from the pack just a little bit? The players to watch, Ashlyn Barker, we talked about getting to Carson Beck. He's been incredible at doing that. Had 2 sacks a week ago, or last game for Florida State, and played really, really good football in that Virginia game, no doubt about it. He was definitely their best defensive player, and probably got to be that again on Saturday. Now, the defensive backs have to play some really good football, but the only way that works is if the pass rush gets after Carson Beck. Ashlyn Barker's got to be a huge piece of that. And then we talked about the run game. If Miami can just lean on the ball here with Mark Fletcher, they're in really, really good shape. And I'd be thinking about them as a true national title contender because if you're able to just go lean on the ball, Mark Fletcher already has 5 touchdowns on the season, 388 yards. He is a guy that if you're able to just hand the ball back to him and let this crowd kind of be taken out of it by a 12-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to start the game, you're in really good shape the rest of the way. But that is going to be a tall order one way or another. I think Mark Fletcher's got to play a role in this football game because if Miami can't run the football, this thing gets a little bit sketchy pretty quickly. The matchup to watch, kind of what we were just talking about, the Miami offensive line against the Florida defensive line, because this could be the biggest mismatch in the entire game. It could also be a really fun matchup that's just between two totally filled with NFL talent lines that go after each other for 60 minutes. Now, the big time question is, what does Florida State look like? Because it wasn't that they got totally pushed around last week. They tackled really poorly at the line of scrimmage in a number of ways, especially on Jamari Taylor, the running back for Virginia. They have to find a way to do better with that. The defensive line did struggle at times as well. They're going to have to play better. There's no doubt about that. I think Darrell Jackson might be another hugely important player for this Florida State team because you got to be able to slow down the run. Don't necessarily have to do incredible things in the pass rush. You do have to get after Carson Beck, but at the end of the day, you slow down the run, you're able to drop more guys in coverage. At the very least, you're putting Carson Beck into very, very tight windows, and you're making him make plays that maybe he's a little bit more uncomfortable making. The keys to the game. Thomas Castellanos' legs are going to be huge because Ruben Bain is going to be Ruben Bain in this football game. He is an absolute nightmare coming off the edge for that Miami defensive line, and you're going to have to find a way out of it. You're going to have to make some plays with your legs, both scrambling and just read options, keeping them at bay, making sure they can't make a full decision right away and come fully downhill, because you allow those guys to do that for 4 quarters, they're probably going to come up with 6 or 7 sacks. I don't think they're going to be able to do that with Tommy Castellanos' legs because that guy can get away from just about anything. He's going to have to get away from a number of things. If I had to imagine, on Saturday night, he's going to have to make plays, and he's going to have to make them off schedule, off platform. He's very good at doing that. It's going to have to be a huge part of the game, no doubt about it. We talked about it. Carson Beck's mistakes is going to be a huge one in this one. If he doesn't make a mistake, if he doesn't turn the ball over, doesn't put it in danger, I think Miami's able to win this football game. I don't want to say comfortably, but at the very least, they're able to win this football game and walk out undefeated. If he makes a couple of mistakes, that place is going to come alive in a hurry. That Gus Malzahn offense is going to get going, and then you're going to have a real problem on your hands. Because when that offense gets going, there's very few defenses in the country that are going to fully be able to stop it. And you have a guy on Carson Beck on the other side that has in the past let one mistake turn into 2, turn into 3, and then you get some really, really interesting times. And then this one's going to have rivalry juice. There's no doubt about it. This is the biggest Florida State-Miami game we've had in quite some time. I can't even remember the last time there was this much stakes on this game because Florida State losing last week obviously kind of dampers down the marquee top 10 matchup that it would have been hypothetically. It also makes it a little bit more desperate for Florida State in this football game, maybe adds a little bit more energy to that crowd. Now, nervous energy at that, but at the end of the day, it's going to be energy nonetheless, and I think this one's going to be really fun. I can't shake this feeling that Florida State's going to find a way. I don't know how. I don't know what they do. I don't know how Tony White finds a way to get to Carson Beck. I don't know how they turn him over. I don't know what Thomas Castellanos does in this football game, but they get the win. They find a way to do it, 30-27 at home. It's a weird place. Miami going on the road for the first time this year. They're prone to do one of these. Miami has always been prone to have one of these games where you look up at the end of it and you're thinking, how did they lose that game? I think this is it. I think Florida State finds a way. I think they're uber motivated after what happened last week. They got that extra day off, which matters as much as we'll see how much it matters at the end of the day. But I do think Florida State finds a way to win this football game. I just think that's what the ACC is this year. I think it's going to be weird all over the place, and I think this weekend will definitely bear that out. But it's an incredible 2 games. There's no doubt about that. I don't think a lot of people thought it was going to be Alabama Vanderbilt being the number 1 game, or number 2 game probably, of the weekend going into this year, but that's where we are. It's going to be incredible to watch these ones unfold, but let's get into some conference matchups. After this break, we will jump into Iowa State, Cincinnati, Texas, Florida, Virginia, Louisville, a really interesting one over there in Louisville, Kentucky. We'll talk about that and a couple other games right after this, so stick with us.